for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s.
That's right. It was. Or maybe it was more. Maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was like 30 9/11s, you know, when you think about it. That was our President Joe Biden talking about the October 7th attacks on Israel. And that's what this episode is about.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good episode in that the comparisons, you know, the October 7th attacks is Israel's 9/11, as Israel's 15 9/11s. It was made a lot, and at first I found it kind of offensive. I thought, like, well, you know, 9/11, like another 5,000 people died from asbestos at Ground Zero.
Sure.
Like, so there's a lot more people died.
So it's
9/11.
offensive that they downplayed it, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, so at first I found it offensive, but then, like, you start, as the months have gone on since October 7th, we've got more information. Now I realize, actually, the comparison is really apt. And what I wanted to do with this episode is just talk about 3 areas where October 7th was exactly like Israel's 9/11. It was exactly like 9/11. And those 3 areas are: there was insider trading by people who knew it was coming on the stock market to make money.
Hell yeah.
There was a military stand down during the attack itself that delayed, you know, by X number of hours and allowed people to get killed. And there were intelligence warnings that were very direct and specific that were given in advance of the attack, which were all ignored, and the thing was allowed to go forward. And, you know, I'll kind of go through, I think on this free side, I'll just go through the Israel side, and then if we want on the Patreon, we can talk about the 9/11 side. I have in this podcast talked about 9/11 a lot, but those 3 areas, I have pretty compelling evidence. We'll have all the citations, the articles that I cited here in the description for this episode. But I think it's just like, on a simple matter, why would they want to do this? Why would Israel want to allow this to happen? Well, Netanyahu very well could be in prison right now instead of still in power. And they actually do finally have their chance to have a final solution for Gaza. Doesn't mean that's going to succeed, but without October 7th, they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing now. They wouldn't have, you know, 10,000 people, a lot of them children, killed every month, and the president and everyone in the U.S. government and media defending it. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think, you know, we can go in whatever order we want, but kind of what initially convinced me of a conspiracy with 9/11 was the insider trading, and I think finally we got the same evidence for Israel and the October 7th thing, and it makes sense where if people knew these conspiracies were coming, if there were informed people who allowed them to happen, it makes sense that some of them would get a little greedy and try to make a few bucks. Like, wouldn't you if you knew 9/11 was coming?
Yeah, I've never been faced with a decision to like make a lot of money to do something really bad. I truly haven't.
Yeah, I don't have like money to take from one place and put in another.
Or just get a bunch of money
Yeah.
for doing something like bad, and you just got to click a couple buttons.
Yeah,
on the
you go,
computer,
oh, thank you.
You know?
Yeah, no one's
Yeah.
given me information to garner income.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's
Yeah.
all.
I know.
They'll say you could shovel my driveway.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the kind of deals I'm.
The only kind of money I
Gal.
get offered, they go, "Hey, do you want to do this for like $150?" And I go, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like an adult man who
yeah.
people go, "Can you watch my kid?"
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, "Hey, you want to work tomorrow?" I go, "Oh, really? Really?" I'm not like a materialistic guy or anything, but I was driving through. Deb had a doctor's appointment yesterday, so we drove through Diker Heights, which is like a kind of a suburban, like Italian. It's like a wealthy Italian, almost suburb,
Sure.
part of Brooklyn. And I saw this house yesterday. It was like this massive house, and on the front lawn, they had all these like stone like animals, like they had like lions, and then like a bunch of goats, and it was like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
really
and for a second, I was like, "Whoa, what do I have to do to get that beautiful house?" You know?
Yeah, I feel like people don't have those conversations. That's another world.
Well, you got to go.
Yeah.
You got to do like 20 9/11s to get a house like that.
Just like there's
Yeah,
people underground, there's people just above ground not dealing with us.
But I think doing 9/11s, like I heard your first one is difficult, and then after you break the seal, you're like, okay, this ain't so bad.
There's like a groove you get into.
Yeah. So let's
let's get into it.
get into it.
So there's this article in Haaretz, which is the Israeli newspaper. The headline is, "Did Hamas make millions betting against Israeli shares before October 7th massacre?"
Now let me ask you this real quick: which one of us is the most susceptible to betraying our values? for a little bag of money?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's probably me.
It might be you because
I feel like we're all pretty principled, but Scott's the best, and then
Scott is the most principled.
Scott is
maybe the most
principled.
principled man I've ever met in
The
my
least capable of making any sort of income. Every day I sit with myself for an hour and think about how wrong it is to get money for a service.
Yeah.
But then also,
Sure.
like, I can't be your slave either. I'm having like a really difficult time.
Yeah.
With trying to follow Christ.
You are probably one of the most honorable men to ever walk the earth. It's a shame. Yeah. I think there has to be like an afterlife where you're going to be rewarded, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's how you know capitalism works, though. It's because if you rank the three of us from like most evil to least evil, it also lines up with most net worth to least net worth.
Yeah.
Like Scott is the best and he has the least money.
Sure.
You're saying I'm the most evil?
I'm saying you're right in the middle. You're the median.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you think you make more money than Sean?
You think you have more money than me?
Yeah, because you got a kid. You have to spend all that
Yeah.
money on your kid.
Yeah.
I don't have a kid.
I just
I
assumed
know,
Sean's
but I do
stacking
have
money.
I do have 5 million Shiba Inu coins. Did I ever tell you that? Yeah.
You didn't say that.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. I spent like $300 and I have 5 million of something.
Oh, well, so obviously, I don't know why I have to keep repeating this, but I live with my mother, and next door, a guy similar to my age also moved back in with his mother, you know? And I'm like, oh, we're both like, you know, going through it or whatever. And then I spoke to her. We were both walking our dogs the other day, and she was like, yeah, he has enough to buy a house. He's just debating on like where if it's a house or if he wants to buy an apartment.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were
somewhere.
going to
And
say
I'm
like,
oh, yeah, similar, same thing. I'm just trying to plan the next move.
I thought you were going to say like, he fell off a roof at work and has severe brain damage.
yeah. And I'm like, well, I'll hang out with him.
Yeah.
I got a podcast.
Oh, yeah. He was working 3 jobs to provide for his family and he got sucked into a bread machine.
Yeah.
He got sucked into an industrial English muffin cooker. Yeah, so we're like in the same boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can like push his wheelchair in the neighborhood or something. But anyway, yeah. So, okay, October 7th. Let's get into it because I'm a little tired of hearing about October 7th.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it does change everything because that's the entire justification for the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
And you know what? Honestly, that 9/11, the real 9/11, was the justification for what the U.S. did after 9/11, which, depending on the estimate, you kill 1, 2, up to 6 million people in the Muslim world.
And for the record, our 9/11 was the real 9/11.
Yes.
Okay? I don't want to hear this horse shit about Israel's fucking 9/11.
Yeah.
We have the 9/11.
I mean, it is true. Like, you had to try 15 times harder to do 9/11 in the U.S. Based on the population.
Right.
You had to have 4 to 10 war games all taking place. So there were only 4 F-16s on the entire East Coast.
Yeah.
When there's usually like several hundred. But anyways.
Well, 15 9/11s, that's like a movie pitch for the sequel to 9/11.
Yeah.
And then when you see what happened on October 7th, you go, what a dog shit sequel. Well, how did you got none of the original characters.
Yeah.
There's no, like, we had giant planes in the first one and giant buildings.
Right.
This sequel sucks.
It would be like the Expendables 2 with none of the
Yeah, this
none
is
of
like
the
some
guys.
on Redbox shit, and your dad brought it home. He's like, I heard you like Transformers, and you're like, this is actually demented what you bought me.
Right.
That's what October 7th is. It's like Transmorphers.
It's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Lizards.
Yeah, it
What
sucks.
the fuck is this? Yeah.
Yeah, you go, Dad, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the end of Dragon Ball Z where the power levels got too high. And they couldn't break the scouters anymore. That's how many 9/11s it is.
Right.
But anyways, look, so okay, you got insider trading, you got military stand down, you got intelligence warnings ignored. So insider trading, this Haaretz article, did Hamas make millions betting against the Israeli shares before October 7 massacre? And it blames it on Hamas, but again, we don't know who did this. Somebody did this, but and it's based on this paper called Trading on Terror, which was published in the Social Science Research Network. Just so happens there are 3 different econometric papers. There's more than that, but there's at least 3 ones. Based on the real 9/11 that show evidence of insider trading. Because how they do this, you know, the SEC or whoever investigates insider trading, independent researchers can do this as well, is you can look at a stock and you look for suspicious activity. Like, usually only X number of shares get traded in the average day or week. And then suddenly you see a massive spike right before a big news event. That's a pretty big hint that somebody knew something was coming. Or another thing that is kind of a tell.
Or Nancy Pelosi's driving a new car.
Exactly. Another thing that's a big tell is
Suddenly her husband's got a bunch more money for gay sex right after the pandemic happened.
the ratio of puts to calls. So a call is a bet that the stock price will go up. A put is a bet that the stock price will go down. The actual mechanism of a put is you borrow the stock, you immediately sell it, and then you can buy it back later if the price goes down. So the ratio of puts to calls on any given stock should be not quite, but in the neighborhood of 1-to-1. Because if a market is functioning correctly, the supply and demand will kind of even out, and you would expect like, oh, hey, there's a whole bunch of calls on this. I think this is there's too many calls. I'm going to put some puts in, or vice versa. And so when you have like a really crazy puts to call ratio, that's kind of a telltale sign that somebody knows something is up. And so there's this paper again in the Social Science Research Network. It's written by Robert Jackson and Joshua Mitz. And Robert Jackson's the New York University School of Law. Joshua Mitz is Columbia Law School. So these are very serious people. And I'm just going to quote a couple things from the Haaretz write-up of this. Short selling Israeli shares, betting that they will fall, spiked in the days before October 7th, far exceeding the short selling during, quote, numerous other periods of crisis. And it talks about this exchange-traded fund called EIS. Exchange-traded fund is a basket of securities that tracks an underlying index. So you can get an exchange-traded fund for the S&P 500, for example, the stock exchange. That'll just kind of give you a pretty broad exposure where if the S&P 500 goes up 1%, your ETF goes up 1%, down or whatever. So EIS does that for the Israeli market on the New York Stock Exchange. So this EIS, and I'm quoting from Haaretz now, EIS is an exchange-traded fund that tracks Israeli shares in New York. It's a way to bet on Israeli shares without buying any. EIS tracks the main indices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, including giant Israeli chemical companies, and
their market is mostly like sneakers and hair gel, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Ecstasy testing kits.
Yeah. White Range Rovers and shirts that are bedazzled.
Right. Labels with Star of David that you can put on Turkish foods and say that it's Israeli.
Yeah.
Anyways, so quoting from Haaretz now, Jackson, the guy and the team that wrote the paper, found strong indications in that early April, somebody in the U.S. stock market anticipated catastrophe in Israel, leading stocks to crash. On October 2nd, that somebody or somebody's carried out an enormous volume of short transactions on the EIS, this exchange-traded fund on Israel. Enormous volume of short transactions on the EIS, meaning they bet against Israel. In fact, the volume of short transactions on October 2nd was so huge, 227,000 units compared to a few thousand on any given day, that it didn't seem like a gamble. Whoever was behind the transaction apparently harbored confidence that disaster would strike Israel. So, if you short a stock, and I just explained this, but you borrow it, you immediately sell it, then you buy it back later for cheap. People shorting Israeli shares on October 2nd did well. The value of EIS fell by 7.1% on October 11th, the first day the American market was open for business after the massacre. And over the 20 days following that terrible weekend, EIS lost 17.5% of its value. To examine how unusual the gamble against Israel was, the researchers checked the volume of short transactions in EIS units from 2009 to 2023, during which Israel experienced plenty of crises. There were 3,570 trading days throughout the period. The volume of shorts on EIS on October 2nd was in the top 99th percentile. The, quote, short ratio for EIS was also extraordinary on October 2nd. It is extremely unlikely that the volume of short selling on October 2nd occurred by random chance, they wrote. And, it kind of goes on like this. But, and then the paper continues, somebody did we don't know if it was the same person, but somebody also did the same thing on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. So they had this like I just said here, typical volume of short transactions on any given day would be a few thousand, 227,000 5 days before. And a short transaction, there's what's called naked shorts where you can lose a ton of money.
Right.
again, you're borrowing
That's how with GameStop, right?
yeah. If you're borrowing a bunch of these shares and then immediately selling them with the expectation that you can buy them back later for cheaper, well, if the price goes up, like you're fucked. And there's covered shorts and stuff. But these kind of like that kind of insane volume on a short transaction 5 days before an attack, it's just defies belief to really believe this is a coincidence, and especially when the same fucking things happens on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, TASE, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. The researchers also looked into shorts on the Tel Aviv.
It's like that meme with the superhero where he's like trying to pick the button, and it's like, stop my family from getting killed, make a bunch of money, and he doesn't know which one to pick.
The researchers also looked into shorts on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange and found a significant spike in the days before October 7th. Shorting the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange mid-September to October would have been enormously lucrative, the researchers calculate. In just Bank Leumi alone, quote, 4.43 million new shares sold short over the September 14 to October 5th period, yielding profits of approximately or nearly 900 million US dollars on that additional short selling. And, the article kind of concludes, only investigation by law enforcement in Israel and the United States may uncover who benefited from the short transactions. And I'll just tell you this right now. And this exact same thing happened with the 9/11 shorts, where a week, 2 weeks after 9/11, you had some articles in CBS News and the Wall Street Journal saying, oh, did did bin Laden know he was going to do 9/11 and also try to make some money on the stock market? And then essentially you just get it disappearing. And that's how like, it wasn't Hamas, it wasn't Al-Qaeda. Because it's like, look, man, these people understand the propaganda value of, hey, if you want to keep the dead kids of Gaza off the front screen, just say, look at these rich leaders of Hamas. We, the Israeli and the U.S. law enforcement, we investigated these short transactions, and we found that it was Hamas behind them. But they're not going to do that because it wasn't Hamas. What's going to happen is exactly what happened with 9/11, where this story disappears from the news, or in the case of the 9/11 short selling, the 9/11 Commission report writes a very brief thing which explains some but not all of the transactions. Like they talk about this newsletter being sent out into investors on September 9th, but that doesn't explain short transactions that start on September 6th, and they say... they link to the Securities and Exchange Commission investigation, but then somebody later tried to Freedom of Information Act that, and the Securities Exchange Commission said, we destroyed the relevant records. So it's just kind of that more than anything else is what initially convinced me that there was something more to 9/11, and I think that more than anything else kind of convinced me with October 7th that people knew it was coming and it was to an extent allowed to happen.
Yeah. Do you feel like the propaganda is kind of wearing you down a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just like every day seeing new fucking dead kids killed with my fucking tax dollars.
Yeah.
And I just go to work and I just, I haven't stopped paying my taxes. So what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And it's like you have to go back to work.
You have to work, and people like, and if people call you whiny on the internet for still caring about this, it's like, sorry, I'd love to talk about other shit, but they're still killing kids.
Well, that's the crazy thing to me. I don't understand why people are bothered by it.
What do you mean?
It's weird when you talk about this stuff and they go, "Wow, that was really funny," or they seem very triggered by you talking about it. Like you're not supposed to. Like it bothers them for some reason, and I'm trying to figure out why that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it is something about their own humanity.
Yeah.
Where when you see somebody else post something on the internet, and maybe they get a lot of likes for just being like, genocide is bad.
Right.
And when you see somebody else doing that, and it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Sometimes people are performative, but I think there's a lot of projection in that where it's like...
I think so too, yeah.
How can you see, like one of the things that fucked me up recently, and you can see this video, it's like a guy, just a father with his, like, I don't know her exact age, but infant
She's
daughter.
young, yeah.
4 years old maybe. They're both killed by Israeli snipers. And you see their fucking bodies writhing. I mean, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah.
And it's just like...
They shoot them at the same time?
Adjacently, yeah. And it's like... These
they shoot
are...
one of them first?
Well, I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to just imagine.
What type of Looney Tunes gun? Was it one gun?
Well, no, was he holding his daughter
They're lying on the ground adjacent to each other.
before they get shot?
After I've only seen the video after they got shot.
okay.
I
Yeah.
saw them writhing and die. Yeah.
Okay. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people. I hate the people that go like, "Why are you? Why?
Mike's like, what
They
was he
question the
wearing?
intention of it is odd.
It's odd, but there must be some kind of disappointment with themselves or something.
Well,
I mean, even if you do find it annoying, it's like, why do you have to say something?
Why would you acknowledge that you find it annoying?
Yeah.
Well, it's like, you
What?
know,
Like, why are you attacking me?
Yeah.
Just let me be. Even if you think I'm cringe, just let me be cringe.
Yeah, it's all so easy to scroll past
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very corny of them.
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I mean, it's like snipers.
You hear that, haters? You're corny.
It's corny.
Well, snipers, it's like they knew what they were fucking shooting. And, you know, there's
course.
Israeli snipers shot nurses in hospitals. They've assassinated all sorts of journalists and people with drones. And they know what they're aiming at, you know, like a lot of it is indiscriminate murder, but a lot of it is targeted assassination. And I think it's just, if you're able to go about your life, and this, you can kind of see these videos and there's new ones every day, and you can avoid them if you want to avoid them. But if you're able to see them and not have that have an impact on you, and you see it has an impact on other people, I think on some level you are divorced from your humanity. And I think there's kind of projection where you go, oh, they're having a human reaction to seeing little kids get slaughtered.
And why am I not?
Why am I not?
Yeah.
They must be performative.
Yeah.
They must be whiny. They must be posting on social media for likes. They must not understand that
Right.
Joe Biden actually is playing 12D chess and he has the situation under control. And he knows you just got to let him kill like 10,000 kids every month. And then, you know, and then he'll have influence over the government and we'll get a better deal in the end.
Well, maybe it's like the reality is just so horrifying that it's hard to confront.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, like, I mean, I think I talked about this last episode. I got into it with my dad on Christmas Eve about this stuff. And it's like, you know, you talk to some of these people and you go, all right, well, I don't think I'm going to get through to them. And then also you know, it's like I'm not going to convince them. So then it feels like it's kind of a waste of time. So then you go, all right, maybe there's a better use of my time. And then I don't know, it just kind of, I definitely feel like my fervor has sort of diminished a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also don't know if I can like keep looking at dead kids every day.
No, I don't seek them out, but
Yeah, they pop. Yeah.
They just appear.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not going to be like, hey, fuck you, I'm unfollowing for showing me that dead child.
Right, exactly.
How dare you bring my attention to this?
Exactly.
And there's like a big propaganda campaign that just continues. And so it's like, yeah, we're just acknowledging real videos that are being posted.
Yeah.
There's actual money going into other shit. I mean, they just found out that like CNN, like everything that happens over there has to like filter through some like Israeli, you know, like analysts and go, okay,
Sure.
this is okay.
Yeah.
I saw on CNN today, before I came here, like a guy speaking on behalf of Israel in Israel was saying that a tactic of Hamas's warfare, a tactic they use is rape. And it's like, that's not real.
Yeah.
Like I am still someone who believes that there were some people who were raped on October 7th because I think
Well,
it was the way it happened. I think over 2,000 people crossing a border, murders. I see it occurring. I do not think it's a tactic of war. And when you say it's a tactic of war, you're really making them out to be like boogeymen, and that doesn't exist. It's not like a thing they're taught in
but
training.
if they're, and I just want to say this, because I don't really know either, but if they're carrying out a military operation,
Yeah.
do you think that they have time to be like, oh, I'm going to get some pussy?
Yeah, I don't think rape is.
Like, where do you think
it's not
they-
specifically?
Well,
going
they
to
are
get some
Israelis,
pussy.
so that's pretty high up on their mind.
But you know, I mean, I saw videos of families tied up. They shot a dog. They made kids watch their dad get shot. And so there's these things that I go,
Yeah.
I could see some guys rape people. Like it's not.
Yeah,
if you went
okay,
over there
yeah.
and murdered people, like that's real. It's okay to say that that's real.
Yeah.
And that when the attacks happened, other shit went down. I think it's like realistic and okay to say, because when people hear people react like, no, that didn't happen.
Sure.
Well, now they know you're lying, and so now they can lie all they want. They can go, well, fuck you, and then also this, and this, because you're not being honest when you say that.
No, but
of course there's a possibility of rapes happening.
I'm not afraid of acknowledging that reality. It just seems like there hasn't been great evidence on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how you would.
And I don't want to.
Yeah,
but you're right. I also don't really want to believe that they did that. But I'm not afraid of like confronting that reality if it's.
There's literally
okay, like the tit cutting off thing, right?
Yeah.
Which I go, yes, that's absurd and like
It's
comical.
absurd.
You saying
It's
that tit cutting off,
yeah.
but I've been watching like murder videos my whole life, right? Yeah, ladies get their tits cut off all the time when they're being murdered on the street, when they're being murdered at homes. Like I've unfortunately just always had access to the internet, and I've seen a lot of depressing things. So when they go, there was an attack and this, and this happened, I go, yeah, those things could have happened. They could have.
Yeah, they could have. But that's the problem, though, is that's not evidence.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
When this story is being used to again justify the slaughter of children,
That's the problem.
And
like, oh, it's going to happen again.
You better have some fucking
And hey,
evidence.
I just want to say right here, killing a kid is worse than raping a lady. All right.
That was good. I was worried we wouldn't get any clips out of this episode. But no, I mean, yeah, it's just okay when it's being used as atrocity propaganda to justify mass
I'd rather
murder.
my mother-in-law get raped than my kid get killed.
It's fair enough.
That's fair.
Yeah.
When it's being used like that, then yes, you do have to present evidence. And yes, even if the women in question are dead, it is perfectly possible for forensic evidence to determine if a woman's been raped before she was murdered.
Right.
We've done it
And
thousands of times. If
Yes.
you've ever seen a serial killer documentary, you know that they can do this. And Israel could allow UN investigators in, but they refuse to do that.
Right.
And-
I don't think we're afraid of that reality. We just question
Right.
the evidence.
So it's like, yes, I
And
acknowledge.
we're not reading the New York Slimes again, who pushed that narrative.
Yeah, well,
we're only
they're-
reading the New York Post from now on.
those.
We're only reading puns and a good sports section.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the if you don't have actual evidence, then what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And they tend to say that every time they go, women were raped, and then also they were like burnt alive, and we can't really do anything about their bodies.
Right.
Like they always add that part of you're not getting evidence, but you go, damn.
You can't name.
Yeah,
or-
one of the guys sneezed and the ashes went all over the place. So, unfortunately.
More and more people are willing to admit that the concert seems to be mostly Israel just shitting the bed.
Well, they're still pushing the but they're still pushing the beheading thing. I saw a guy talk about beheading children today, and it's like, yeah. My thing is, the way you have to treat Israelis and women is that if they lie once, you got to not ever trust them again. That's been my sort of one of my rules in life.
That's right, men's rights, Columbo.
Yeah. Now wait a second, Shmuel. You said you saw just one thing.
And just one more thing, ma'am.
Where was he putting his penis exactly? And you said, where was the Hamas man putting his penis?
Well, just one more thing, ma'am. You said he was.
I don't know. I don't remember.
That's the woman.
No, that's yeah.
Just one more thing, ma'am. You said the Hamas man who raped you, he had a 5-inch penis. We measured it. He has a 3.5-inch penis. I've been exposed.
We have Israel probably has every Palestinian's penis documented.
They probably do, yeah.
In like a database.
Right. And that's, what was always fishy. And it's like, it is interesting where
We have a photo of every man in Gaza's penis.
some, let's say, Hamas supporters, and I don't say that pejoratively, just, they don't like this idea that Israel allowed this to happen. And I'm not saying Israel could have prevented it entirely or that Israel is so much better or omnipotent or all that, but they're like, this was an incredible surprise attack, totally took the Israelis off guard.
Hamas supporters say that?
Some, yes. There's like some overlap between, of course, Israel supporters or Netanyahu specifically, Netanyahu supporters, and most mainstream Democrats and Republicans are very adamant about this idea that no, this was not allowed to happen. This was a total surprise. You know, mistakes were made, incompetence. And I just want to say something about incompetence theory is that this idea that governments are stupid and make huge mistakes, not really true in my experience. Like, yes, governments do make mistakes, but they're not actually that much dumber than the corporate sector. In fact, I would argue governments are more efficient at doing things than the corporate sector. In my experience, and I've been through the corporate sector, I've been through the government. Government, by and large, gets things done. There's little bits of waste and inefficiency. Things get done, though. And when they do fuck up, people do get held accountable. And that's another thing you see with October 7th and 9/11 is supposedly these massive fuck-ups. Nobody gets demoted. Nobody gets fired. Nobody gets punished. It's just these massive fuck-ups that seem to give in both governments exactly what they wanted. Seems kind of weird that you just fuck up and get everything you wanted and you said you wanted, but whatever. But anyways, the point was Hamas supporters, sometimes they don't like this idea that Israel allowed it to happen. And I'm not saying that Israel could have prevented it entirely, but Netanyahu, for example, moved 2/3 of the soldiers on the border to the West Bank just a few days before. 2/3. It was like he left around 800 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, on the border of Gaza, moved another 1,600 over to the West Bank. And this is compared to, anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 Hamas fighters, depending on how you count it. So, and that was to defend the entire Gaza border, just 800 soldiers. So, and I'll go through more of the evidence, but the point is, if Israel had paid serious attention to any of these warnings, or if they'd allowed their military to respond quicker, this probably still would have happened, but it wouldn't have happened at the scale that it did. It wouldn't have been such a mass slaughter at the dance rave, for example. And that would have given them less propaganda value. And also, even the Hamas fighters themselves have talked about how they were surprised at how easy it was. Like, they were expecting to just get fucking murdered as soon as they got out the wire. But they were like, where the fuck is the resistance?
Yeah.
They got way farther than they thought they would. So every single piece of evidence does kind of align with a stand down, with a let's let it happen, and then let's use it to further our own goals. And that doesn't mean they're omnipotent. That doesn't mean they control events. It's just, so far it's working out for Netanyahu. He's still in power. He's not in prison. And I think Israel will lose in the end. I think they did make a huge miscalculation, but I think they just had an idea that it's like, how can we fucking take Gaza?
Yeah.
How do we end this status quo? How do we, have a final solution?
But the only way they really lose is if public opinion goes down too far.
And it's
right?
starting to, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, in the meantime, we're going to have a ton of slaughter and everything.
Sure, yeah.
But I feel like, 3 or 4 months ago, it was people didn't really have much knowledge of the conflict. And also, you don't want to say anything against Israel because you don't want to seem anti-Semitic or anything. And now people are just like I saw one of our friends, the girl who's on OnlyFans, but she just tweeted "fuck Israel to death." And
one of your friends.
No, well, but
Sure.
But I'm just seeing a more mainstream, dislike of Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very nervous about this. South Africa's actually.
Are they?
South Africa's charging them with genocide at The Hague.
Yeah.
Israel seems very nervous about this.
It just feels like they really overplayed their hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, whether they made a miscalculation or not is not relevant to the question of whether this was to an extent allowed to happen. Doesn't mean it was 100% allowed to happen. It just means that, as I will kind of go through right in a second here, they got a lot of warnings. They could have beefed up border security at Gaza. They could have not moved Netanyahu could have not moved 1,600 troops out. They could have, they could have had a faster response. Depending on the area, over 20 different communities or kibbutzes or and towns and such were attacked. Depending on the area, response time was 6 to 12 hours.
It's a long time.
It is a long fucking time. And, so you do kind of put all these things together, and that's kind of where it goes with any of these debates with these anti-conspiracy people, is they can always dismiss one piece of evidence as that's incompetence, that's a coincidence. Yeah. But it's once you start to go thing after thing after thing after thing, and you look at, who benefits,
Yeah.
cui bono, or however.
Yeah.
If I was a smarter man like Michael Parenti, I would know how to say the Latin for who
That's
benefits.
okay. We
But,
feel stupid around you sometimes.
I appreciate that. I'm actually falling apart.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'll just quote from the abstract of the paper that I mentioned, and then I'll move on to the next thing. The short selling that day, October 2nd, 5 days before the attack, exceeded numerous other periods of crisis, including the recessions following the financial crisis, the 2014 Israel-Gaza war, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Similarly, we identify increases in short selling before the attack in dozens of Israeli companies traded in Tel Aviv. For one Israeli company alone, 4.3 million Israeli companies, or 4.43 million new shares sold short over September 14 to October 5th period yielded profits of millions on that additional short selling for one out of hundreds of securities traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Although we see no aggregate increase in shorting of Israeli companies on U.S. stock exchanges, we identify a sharp and unusual increase just before the attacks, October 2nd, in trading in risky short-dated options on these companies expiring just after the attacks. That's the other thing about these puts that I mentioned. They buy them on October 2nd, and they all expire right after October 7th. So it's like, and Gaza's was and is the most heavily surveilled place on earth. It's not that big. Everyone who's ever been there talks about you would constantly hear Israeli drones buzzing overhead. They have Israeli border security and soldiers were looking into it the entire time, and a bunch of them made warnings. Like, the fucking ridiculous thing is there were 2 different dry runs that we know of. Hamas did practice runs, and we know that Israel knew of them, or at least people identified them and passed them up the chain. We don't know how far up the chain they got, but
They actually took like a dummy and sexually assaulted it.
Yeah. They're like practicing cutting chicken cutlets off of dummies.
Yeah. They took water
Yeah.
balloons and
Yeah.
there were water balloons attached to the dummies and they were stabbing them. Yeah.
yeah, they had like one of
Can you
the...
believe girls
What does
listen
a
to the
dry run
show?
look like? Yeah, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
I wonder, what does a dry run look like for
Shouts
that?
out. Oh, and yeah. It probably they're just practicing how to
Yeah, just like
move.
Well, it's like
Yeah.
it's like one of those plastic baby dolls that you practice taking care of in high school, but they practice
Yeah.
putting it in an oven.
Yeah.
Practice beheading 40 of the baby
yeah,
dolls.
they all had to take care of an egg for a week.
Yeah. They just slice it in half.
Yeah. They hard boiled it.
Yeah.
All right, so the world, this is the warnings ignored, okay? The World Socialist website, wsws.org, which is a very funny place because it's like they have they're like Trotskyists. They have the kookiest opinions on some shit you've heard in your life. Like they have a bunch of articles about how Harvey Weinstein was railroaded, which is like, I respect. They're like
Nobody has that take.
they're big Woody Allen defenders too,
I was
which is a
thinking
little more.
running a train. I was picturing him getting a train ran on him.
Yeah.
Railroaded. Okay.
No. He was set up.
Yeah. He was
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
up.
You know what's funny too? I guess the opposite of that is when I used to work at Got Junk, we would sometimes call the KKK and listen to their like voicemail message.
Yeah.
And it was 2013, so it was right around the Trayvon Martin verdict. And this guy's going like, and I just want to say that George Zimmerman is a Jew and a Mexican. He ain't got a drop of white blood in him. It's like everybody else, every racist was like defending George Zimmerman. And the KKK was like, fuck this guy.
That's good. Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a unique take.
Right.
I love unique takes.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, yes. Well, it's just funny about the World Socialist website where they'll have these kind of batshit takes.
Also, what does that have to do with socialism, by the way?
Harvey
What's Harvey
Weinstein's
Weinstein? Yeah.
No, Lenin wrote about this, man.
Give me a break. Yeah. Michael Parenti. And he was the most popular
film producer.
producer. And all of a sudden, he's accused of sexual assault. He made Pulp Fiction. He made...
We see a proletariat theme in his work. The workers.
He didn't even have a penis. The man has no penis.
The workers had no voice before Harvey Weinstein.
Chomsky's like, it's quite ridiculous that anybody would say that Harvey Weinstein is innocent. Shut up, cock. Shut up, Chomsky.
The assassination of Harvey Weinstein.
Pulp Fiction is a story about workers who are working for their boss.
The Blind Side is a movie about overcoming, and they destroyed him for it.
I'm trying to think of the other Harvey Weinstein movies. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead. I think that was a good bit.
We did enough.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, World Socialist website, and it is just interesting to me because it's like very few outlets on the left, journalists or whatever, these Jacobin people, The Nation, none of them will fucking touch this stuff about insider trading.
About
on
Harvey Weinstein?
Well, yeah, that too. But more to my chagrin, they won't touch this 9/11 insider trading stuff. They won't touch this October 7th insider trading stuff because it introduces all sorts of complications and it suggests the very real fact that intelligence agencies have their own interests and also governments don't just work to protect their citizens.
But you know who will? The Out for Smokes podcast.
That's right.
baby.
Yeah.
The U.S. government actually will sacrifice you. If you are a U.S. citizen, they will sacrifice you if it advances their own interests. They don't just defend freedom and democracy, well-meaning or not. They don't just accidentally slaughter a bunch of people in some misguided foreign adventure. They know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
They have an agenda.
Your kids, too.
Yes. And it's like, so nobody on the left at Jacobin or The Nation will deal with this, but the World Socialist website will. And I actually looked back, October 2001, the World Socialist website had the 9/11 insider trading story.
Wow.
A month after 9/11. And just in the same timing, by December 2023, they had the same thing about October 7th. There was a stand down. There was insider trading. So it's like, I'm going to quote a bit from this World Socialist website article, but they're quoting a lot from the New York Times, and they're just kind of putting a couple different pieces together.
Soon you would walk around in a T-shirt and no underwear, walking around the house. And Mia Farrow wasn't fucking him enough.
Mia Farrow hit her with a shoe like my father made when he was in Italy in the old country. Shoes mean something to Italians.
And we're supposed to believe this man didn't want some pussy?
All right, yeah. So, okay, World Socialist website. The New York Times reports on a 40-page report produced by Israeli intelligence more than a year before the attack, codenamed the Jericho Wall document. And Jericho Wall, if you look it up, you can read the New York Times story. I'll link to it, blah, blah, blah. I'm quoting from the New York Times here. Hamas followed the blueprint with shocking precision. The document called for a barrage of rockets at the outset of the attack, drones to knock out the security cameras, and automated machine guns along the border, and gunmen to pour into Israel en masse, and paragliders on motorcycle and on foot, all of which happened on October 7th. Then this is back to quoting from the World Socialist website. Moreover, the Times reported Israeli military and intelligence officials knew Hamas carried out an exhaustive day-long training mission to practice the plan in detail just 3 months before the attacks. Now we're going back to the New York Times. Quote, the training included a dry run of shooting down Israeli aircraft and taking over a kibbutz and a military training base, killing all cadets. During the exercise, Hamas fighters used the same phrase from the Quran that appeared at the top of the Jericho Wall attack plan. So this is what the New York Times alleges, and they say it's, incompetence that they didn't put this together. But Israeli intelligence had the exact attack plan that Hamas would follow. They had it a year before, and they also observed 3 months before a dry run attack, which came out basically the same way the real thing did. And then I have another piece of evidence that border soldiers, intelligence officers in Israel observed another dry run 1 month before, which they passed up the chain. We don't know how far up the chain it got, but it's like, you just look at all these ignored warnings, you really have to be kind of forced. People talk about Occam's razor. When we had Finkelstein on, he talked about, the Occam's razor, simplest explanation. At some point, when you get all of these little bullet points of evidence, you have to be deliberately trying to believe something, to not recognize that the Occam's razor it was in their interest to let it happen, to not kind of stop it, to not make it, to make it as bad as possible, to give as much propaganda value as possible. And
how many people have to pull out to make a dent? Or it's like based on how much they pull out? Because can't you then pinpoint these people and go like, well, how? Because someone's argument would be, well, how are they not how is it not leaking? How's the information not leaking?
Yeah.
If it's spreading throughout these communities and they're able to take out money, how is it not leaking to anybody else?
It is kind of out in the open, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff.
That's what it feels like. To
best.
me, it feels like the stock market is not even for someone like me. Like I wouldn't even be able to read it. And do some people know that and go like, it's not even an interest for so many people, so let's fuck around with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean it is important to understand that
That's like, it looks like just numbers and triangles to me. I can't even.
It's just all manipulation. You could predict the future if you paid attention to stocks.
No, but there's like higher amounts of activity. I mean, there's people who like study this stuff.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying you could predict the future if you're really good at
No,
stocks.
nobody can predict the future because that's the whole point of like investing. You're trying to predict the future, but like people's guesses are either good
Always
or they're
wrong.
bad. So that's kind of like the interesting thing about it is that like your guess is actually as good as anybody's.
Yeah, I guess I mean the future for like of terrorist events to happen.
Oh.
You can actually go, oh, something is going to happen tomorrow, maybe in this area because this is
Maybe.
ridiculous.
But
if you're watching the stocks, you could pick up on that. I mean, like obviously I wasn't, but if you were like an
if you're like a
observer
stock
of the
guy,
market, and you see all of a sudden something has usually a few thousand, and so there's 227,000 shorts on it.
Yeah.
you can bet they probably know what they're doing.
Yes,
you
yeah.
might want to get in on that shit.
yeah, that's wild.
you can usually tell when Paul Pelosi is going to get his head hit with a hammer just on the stock activity somehow.
You're like a medium.
Yeah.
Call Paul. Paul, lock your doors.
Paul, I just lost $78,000. No gay sex.
Put a helmet on.
No gay sex. Put a helmet on and no gay sex this week.
Get to the basement.
All right, so World Socialist website, and so I mentioned that thing about Netanyahu shifting the troops. That comes from journalist Seymour Hersh, and the World Socialist website is quoting Seymour Hersh, and now I'm quoting the World Socialist website. 4 days after the October 7th attack, veteran journalist Seymour Hersh reported that in the days preceding the attack, quote, local Israeli military authorities, with the approval of Netanyahu, ordered 2 of the 3 army battalions, each with about 800 soldiers that protected the border with Gaza, to shift their focus to the Sukkot festival, taking place near the West Bank. Hersh quoted a source who told him that left only 800 soldiers to be responsible for guarding the 51-kilometer border between the Gaza Strip and southern Israel. That meant that the Israeli citizens in the south were left without an Israeli military presence for, quote, 10 to 12 hours. They were left to fend for themselves. And then there's a different article from the Times of Israel, and this talks about the 8200 Signals Intelligence Unit. Was like a Israeli, intelligence unit that kind of they're heavily involved in like wiretaps, signals intercepts, monitoring Gaza. Like 2 years ago, there's a decision that basically reduced personnel and halted operations on it for the 8200 Signals Intelligence Unit. They would just stop operations overnight and on weekends. And that's a little weird, but I guess the logic at the time was, we got the fence, we got Gaza under control. But so basically those people weren't there, and they talk about if they'd been there, there would have been less confusion at the actual thing, but just kind of quoting from the Times of Israel here. In the weeks following October 7th, several reports have attested that senior IDF officials, including those from the 82nd 100, ignored warnings from subordinates regarding suspicious activity along the Gaza border. A report published by Channel 12 last Thursday alleged that the soldiers in the unit warned that Hamas was preparing a highly organized and meticulously planned mass invasion of Israel. In response, the soldiers were told that their concerns were a fantasy, quote. A non-commissioned officer in Unit 8200 put together a report from an array of raw intelligence data detailing a scenario that essentially predicted the October 7th invasion, Channel 12 said. She, together with his junior officer, also pointed to a Hamas drill 1 month before the Hamas attack, noting that it included preparations for a mass invasion with multiple entry points into Israel. The two presented their concerns to a senior IDF officer, although not one from the 82nd 100, who dismissed their warnings as, quote, fantasies and failed to act on the information.
They were playing with a piñata, but it was a pregnant lady. They were like hitting it. Like, you might want to see this. Just kidding. Hamas would never do such a thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I did have a friend of mine when that guy came out and said they ripped a pregnant woman's baby out. Mm-hmm. somebody who I was friends with sent that to me and said, "Oh, I guess he's lying." But I think the guy was lying. Has that
Probably,
been like?
yeah. Well, like one of the guys that the New York Times quoted in their story about, watching a woman get raped and they would like, the Hamas guys would like stab her as they penetrate or some like really graphic stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, this guy's a fucking military spook who was in the Democratic Republic of Congo for unknown reasons, but it's probably guarding resources for some, shady private military company. And then there's a photo of him during the October 7th attack giving like, I think it's a thumbs up. It's either that or the okay sign. But he's like, there's a photo of him from the day, like lying in the bush, like smiling.
Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, I guess people process trauma differently, but why the fuck are you taking selfies
Yeah.
if that's what you saw that day?
Well, there was that account that said that they cut a woman's breasts off and they were playing with them like
Right, they
toys.
were hacky
They
sacking.
threw it to another guy and they were playing with them like toys.
Right, there's like stoners on the quad,
Yeah.
hacky sack.
Like, can we just say that anybody who believes that should be like jailed? Anybody who looks at those words, I don't really need like
right. No, I mean
anything besides
the New York Times story was literally retarded.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it was. You would have to have actual down. You would have to be Mike Racine's brother. No, I'm sorry.
Jesus.
I shouldn't have said that.
Wait, which article? And this was the worst. The hostage who was released, and she said the only reason she wasn't raped was because like the guy's wife was in the other room or some shit.
You're talking about rape and the door just
Oh, someone came in the room.
Somebody came in right when Scott was saying that.
Oh,
Yeah. It's all right. Was it Chris Italia?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, who cares?
I guess we'll try a happier subject next week.
That's all right. Well,
Anyway.
for whoever that was.
Yeah.
It's probably somebody.
Anyways,
I'm gonna find out.
just still quoting from the Israel Times.
It
The
was
Times
funny.
of Israel.
The door opened. Scott was talking about. Oh, is it Pete? No. Okay. Hey, Pete.
Hey, what up, buddy?
Scott was talking about rape. The door opened and then it closed.
Oh, hey, what's up, man?
Well, that's how he knew a podcast was being recorded.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Times of Israel. In addition to reports regarding the 8200 intelligence, surveillance soldiers from the Combat Intelligence Corps who survived the Hamas attack on their base in Nahal Oz recounted to Khan in October that intelligence officials had dismissed their reports of unusual activity on the Gaza border as routine and unimportant. For at least 3 months prior to October 7th, the soldiers recalled reporting information on Hamas operatives conducting training sessions multiple times a day, digging holes and placing explosives along the border. However, when they presented this to their senior officers, they were ignored and the information was not passed up further up the chain of command. And then it's like, I can honestly go on with this shit. Unfortunately, we're already near the time, but it's like there's so much evidence of this shit. There's we've talked a lot about Egyptian intelligence warned Netanyahu directly. The Congressman Michael McCall is the head of the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee. He told reporters, quote, "We know that Egypt had warned the Israelis 3 days prior to that an event like this could happen." They also...
I mean, a 6 to 12 hour stand down is like, that's a lot.
pretty crazy, yeah.
Oh, no, it's wild. Yeah.
And then this is a Times of Israel write-up.
But so it took them 6 hours to show up at the music festival?
Yeah, actually longer for the music festival. It depends on the area.
But then what happened when they got to the music festival? They were like engaging with security forces
Well,
there?
so this is the weird thing. Okay, so like this is this comes from Haaretz. At 7 a.m., the party organizers for the music festival called Lieutenant Colonel Eled Zandani, who's the man tasked with approving the festival, and told him that terrorists were shooting the partygoers. So 7 a.m., they're shooting partygoers. He suggested that they fend for themselves. The first IDF forces arrived at the scene at 3 p.m. So that's 8 fucking hours.
Yeah.
And then the wrinkle in this...
Yeah, it's a whole fucking school day.
Yeah.
Like what? That's going to the nurse first period and saying, "Mom, come pick me up," and then you're at the nurse's till 3 p.m.
And then you just got to take the bus
Yeah,
home as you're,
fucking what, Mom?
vomiting and having diarrhea.
Yo, out of your mind.
The nurse has run out of pants to give you.
Ran out of saltines for you to chew on.
She's run out of
What?
stock pants.
Wow, a whole school day.
And it's not like it's like a lot of the military bases were overrun, but it's not like they were that far. Like there were Army and Air Force bases like pretty fucking close. It's not a big giant country. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah, again, there's ways to get places now. It's not everybody on foot and bicycle.
Right, like
Crazy.
Boltzmann Booty on Twitter, I got this from him, but he clipped an interview with this guy, Jonathan Pollard. If you don't know Jonathan Pollard, is a former American spook who gave a bunch of huge
Spook like he worked for the CIA.
Yes.
He worked for the intelligence. Yeah.
Yes. He gave a huge quantity of classified info to the Israeli government, and then he was sentenced to life, and then I think Trump commuted him. He got out relatively recently. But now he lives in Israel. He's like, an honored hero because he was an American and he spied for Israel and he did a bunch of time in U.S. federal prison and now he's back in Israel. He gives an interview.
Why do all our allies like bully us? It's like they spy on us. They shoot our ships. They do 9/11. We're only nice to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We put together big parties with Woody Allen.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein.
We invite you to Colin Jost's holiday party, and his pro-Palestinian friends don't say anything to you.
Okay, but Jonathan Pollard gives this interview, and I'll just quote what he says, and I'll link to the video if you want to watch him say it. But he says it took 6 hours for any reaction to occur. He says there were Army and Air Force bases within earshot of what was going on, both at the festival and at some of those towns. They could hear the shooting, they could hear the explosions. And they were essentially just sitting there. And he says, and I'm quoting Jonathan Pollard here, I have friends who were helicopter pilots sitting in their cockpits ready to take off on October 7th, fully loaded. They didn't get their orders for 6 hours. They could hear the fighting. They weren't given permission to take off. So he has friends who were, Apache or whatever, attack helicopter pilots, who just sat in their cockpits for 6 hours. And it's like, okay, fine, maybe he's just making that shit up, but I don't think he is. I think based on what we've seen from this response time, there was hey, let's kind of chill and then we'll send out the orders to go clear this up. Let's let a lot of people get slaughtered. Let's make sure we have enough propaganda, then we'll go clean this up.
Right. Why would he say
it's like
that?
an insurance thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is back to times of Israel. An Egyptian intelligence official said that Jerusalem had ignored, quote, repeated warnings that Gaza-based terror group Hamas was planning, quote, something big, which included apparent direct notice from Cairo's intelligence minister to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And this intelligence official spoke to the Associated Press. He said, quote, Egyptian intelligence official, we have warned them and an explosion of this situation is coming and very soon and it would be big, but they underestimated such warnings. He spoke on condition of anonymity. In one of these warnings, Egypt's intelligence minister, General Abbas Kamal, personally called Netanyahu only 10 days before the massive attack that Gazans were likely to do, quote, something unusual, a terrible operation. Unnamed Egyptian officials told the site they were shocked by Netanyahu's indifference to the news and said the premier told the minister the military was submerged in troubles in the West Bank. And it's just okay, you can say it wasn't specific enough. It's just like a 50-kilometer border with Gaza. If you're getting all of these fucking warnings from all these sources, you could just move more troops there. But they didn't. They moved troops to the West Bank. And it's you just put that with the insider trading, the warnings, this crazy delayed response. And I don't understand how your Occam's razor reaction can be, this was just incompetence, this was just negligence, there was nothing nefarious here.
Yeah.
And, and I think the people who kind of persist with that, even having heard and gone through all this evidence, and if you don't,
people just don't get this information.
I think a lot of people don't get this information, but I think there is willful denial. And I think, this happens on the left too, with some of these Jacobin and The Nation writers and, and of course, mainstream Democrats and Republicans. It makes you think very unpleasant things about the system you live under to kind of acknowledge the reality that it's very nefarious. There are some very evil people, and they'll kill 1,000, they'll kill 10,000 to advance their goals, to make a little money, to get more power. It's been true all of human history, and I guess it's just kind of more comforting to just think they're just morons up there. Those people that clawed their way to the top of the power structure, they're fucking idiots. I'm smarter than them. I can see the Afghan war as a disaster. Why can't they see that? I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fucking 90% of the heroin traffic coming through Hamid Karzai's CIA connected brother. I'm sure there's not like some giant U.S. government operation to traffic heroin, which then which starts with OxyContin and then becomes heroin and now is fentanyl. I'm sure the U.S. government, I'm sure nobody's making money off this. I'm sure it's just we can't stop the drugs. I think these are just unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And it's much more comforting to go about the world believing that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, if you confront the evidence, not really the case.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, we'll have links to all this sources that I cited for this Israel shit in the description. But sound off in the comments what you think about October 7th and Inside Job.
I think that's why I didn't really care for the show Veep.
What is that?
Because they're like, oh, everybody in power is dumb.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a really stupid neoliberal attitude.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? I believe in the power of government. I think government could do 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not some sort of libertarian Reaganite that says the scariest words in the English language are "I'm from the government, I'm here to help."
Yeah.
No, the government can help.
Yeah.
They can do 9/11.
They can do 9/11.
That's such a complicated operation. I think we have a lot of very smart, very talented people who work for the government, and we should give them the credit that they deserve and say, yeah, these people could schedule all those fucking military drills and switch out the planes with drones and then splash the real ones over the Atlantic or whatever exactly happened.
Because that is kind of people's go-to thing where they go, oh, well, that means you think the government is competent.
Yeah, it is for the most part. It's
Yeah.
like, yes, of course, any large organization has inefficiencies and waste. But I think what you will find if you look at the U.S. federal government, it generally does what it sets out to do.
Yeah.
Might not be perfect. It might be, a B minus, but they kind of get there. And when they do fuck up, which does happen, if it's an actual fuck up that doesn't serve their interests, you do see heads roll. You see some accountability. And when these kind of fuck ups that actually do serve very powerful interests in the weapons manufacturers and, the genocidal maniacs who want to occupy Gaza, Netanyahu himself who wants to stay in power, stay out of prison, when things that seem like fuck ups do serve their interests, and then you get all this evidence, all this smoke that says that they're not actually fuck ups. I don't know. Occam's razor points me to a more nefarious and less incompetence-based, less coincidence-based explanation.
Yeah. Do you think you would join a militia?
What kind of militia?
Like, I guess any kind if things got really bad. Like an Islamic one.
I would
In
like
the
to get a
United States?
flag for a group.
Well, I'm just thinking about this conversation I had with my dad, and he brings up anti-Semitism, and I'm like, well, you sound like you're like anti-Arab, which nobody ever, there's no consequences for being anti-Arab, for being dismissive of all these deaths.
For sure.
And he's like, well, I am against Muslim extremism and terrorism, and it's like, but I just feel like the average person doesn't even know what that is.
Yeah.
They keep trying to demonize our boy Osama bin Laden, and they
Keep just making him like us.
Yeah.
Make us like him more.
yeah.
They made us think he didn't have swag. I look at his outfit's different now.
Yeah,
He's like comfy.
sure. Yeah, people just don't. The average person doesn't understand why somebody would join a some kind of militia.
Well, he hated America because we preferred Tifa over Ares in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, well, it's kind of that girl. I talked about it on another podcast. That girl who had someone murder her mother.
Oh yeah, Gypsy Rose.
Gypsy, yeah.
Yeah, and when you read about it, it's like, well, her mother did have to be murdered for her to get out of that situation. She was a little kid, like she was young. What else is she supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people are in situations where they have to join militias. It's just very obvious and apparent.
I mean, I'm not saying that I know why people do it.
No,
I just
but
feel like-
you have to look at it and go, things happen where life is so brutal that people have to join gangs, militias, and they're not always bad.
There's a thing too where
They're
it's like
needed,
sometimes
unfortunately, like yes,
well, there's only a level of like humiliation you can take
yeah.
before you fight back. I don't want my family to think I'm like a loser.
Oh, you're saying you want to join a militia in Brooklyn?
No. I'm just saying that like no, I'm
You're saying you can't be tweeting anymore. You have to
joining a militia is here. I'm like here.
Ah, okay.
But
okay.
I'm saying like you can, or let's say there's like a chasm where I'm like, I'm over here. Here's joining a militia. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to join a militia. But then you keep getting pushed. You can only push somebody so
to
far
joining a
until they-
militia.
I like
Totally,
how
yeah.
Mike was like, Okay, so if we haven't done enough conspiracy to get this podcast demonetized, let's spend the last 5 minutes talking about joining a terrorist organization.
Maybe that's what being in America is you grow up thinking it's the freest place in the world. You start getting older, you realize you want to join a militia. You get older and older, you go, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You're 60, and you go, I'll just join a country club.
Yeah, or you
You're
storm,
like,
or you storm the
"What?"
Capitol.
Yeah, but you're 60, and you go, well, yeah, or you storm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Well, why don't you guys follow us over on Patreon to keep continue this conversation if you want.
Join our militia for $5 a month.
For $5 a month, you can feel like you belong somewhere. And please, if you can, subscribe on YouTube, hit the like button, leave a comment. That helps us out a lot. And your boy has some road dates. I will be in Minneapolis, January 26th and 27th. I'll be in Stamford, Connecticut with Dan Soder, February 2nd and 3rd. I will be at Good Nights in Raleigh on Valentine's Day. And April 3rd, I will be at Zany's in Nashville. So you go to MikeRacineComedy.com for your tickets. And we have an ad.
It was like 15 9/11s.
We have an ad?
Yes.
What
Truck
is it?
Boys Moving Service is the New York City. Truck Boys Moving is serving the New York City area with competitive flat rate pricing, on-time service, and a hassle-free move. Our boys are experienced, efficient, and provide great service with no hidden fees or surcharges. And we are also available for junk removal, cleanouts, expert furniture assembly, picture hanging, and TV mounting. Shoot us an email today for a free estimate at truckboysmoving@gmail.com. That's truckboys with a Z. Truckboysmoving@gmail.com.
And patreon.com/outforsmokes. We'll maybe have a more real 9/11 discussion. Maybe we'll have the three categories I mentioned: insider trading, military stand down, intelligence warnings. Maybe we'll have that on this Patreon. Maybe we'll have it on the one next week. But I got some research for that.
Nice. All right. Get over to Patreon. Bye-bye.